Hey everybody, I just wanted to come before you and start another campfire story. I know this is crazy and they're regarding my dreams, but my dreams have always been a little bit like that. And so today I am going to start off with the introduction to St. Mary's Gate. I didn't realize that was the gate that I was using in my dreams, but the first one is regarding my son. He walked through a lot as a little boy. We walked through a lot of severity in life with just the whole situation emotionally. And so my little son was always on my mind, always worrying about him, always trying to look out for him because he was abused with his father figure and in his family. It just was ongoing. And so I had several dreams regarding my son. My mother, before she passed, she was the first one that ever taught my son how to hang upside down in a tree, and she was the first one to bring in a video game so that they could play one another, and those were fond memories of my mother. And so after she left, after she passed, it was like he had lost a friend, and um, he sunk into depression for a little bit because life was really hard back then. And it was just one of those days that just had me concerned. And I had a dream that night regarding my son, and my mother tells me, she's like, don't you let him take the baby. Don't you let, my son go into his father's hands at the time, because his father was into a lot of different things. He was into a cartel. He was into running drugs. He was into a lot of bad things at the time. And so with that dream and that warning, I was kind of frustrated because it was like no matter what I was trying to do, I could never win. I was always, he had to go see his father. And the one time I went to pick him up, my son was like 5 years old, and I walked in on his father and the babysitter that knew this man, and I didn't know that she had. And he had left something out on the table that my son was trying to smoke, and it was his first time to get high because of how careless they were as I walked in. So I had to yank my son out of that house and take off with him, and it was just a hard story. I was like a 16-year-old mother, so it was really hard. Well, my first introduction to St. Mary's Gate was whenever my son was little. In my dream, there was this buffalo thing. It had the body of a human and it had a buffalo head, but the flesh was rotting off the buffalo, and he was coming after my son. He was going to come after him and me. And so I remember my son's safety was important at the time, and I grabbed my son by the hand and we went running around. It was like a circle around, but it kind of didn't form a complete circle. It was like a horseshoe. And so in between the horseshoe points was a gate area, and this thing was closing in. I could feel his breath, and I could feel the icy coldness of this evil spirit that was pursuing my son and I. And I come up to a wrought iron gate, a black wrought iron gate in my dream, and it had a golden crown on it. And I flung the gate open and flung my son in the gate, and was trying to get into the gate myself. We just barely was able to get in there before that thing tried to get us, and that's where the dream ended. Well, then later on in a dream, I know I have a mission. I know what my mission is from the Lord, and I know it seems a little weird and a little funny, but I know what it is. And so in this dream, we got called to a church, and this church was, it was like a Catholic church, and I just wasn't sure what the meeting was for. There was 12 of us that was called into this meeting, and we all met. And when we all met at this church, all 12 of us, the priest was present. But it was like he wasn't really Catholic. It was just really weird because he basically had a white robe, and he had like this purple sash around his neck, and sorry, my hair keeps getting in my way. And he had it a crucifix, and it had the purple in the center of the crucifix. But anyway, so he's going around telling us about how God requires obedience, and to not be doing our mission is to be being disobedient, and that obedience is better than sacrifice, and that he went on this long, like, every mission is important. And so in this church, it was very pretty. There were like, you walked around and there was like 12 gates. 12 gates to 12 different areas. And for me, it was like there was the apostles or disciples, you know what I mean? And then there was another gate. And so we were to follow this priest around. And what he said we were to do is that the Lord said that he had a mission for each one of us, and he wanted to call out my mission, and wanted us to call out our missions, and then have that confession of our mouths that we acknowledge the missions that we're having, and basically that to do this, we would be confessing with our mouths that we know and we're aware. So anyway, we walk around. I'm following the priest. I'm following at the last, as I always put myself last. And so each gate, another person goes through, and before they go through, they call out what their mission is. For example, like, some was like a minister for such and such, and so then they'd walk through the gate and it would shut on them. And so we walk around with the priest, and it was important because I guess a lot of us, of the chosen, we were called the chosen. We weren't doing our missions yet. There was hindrance and delay that had been attacking all of us. That was the purpose of this meeting. And so, I'm sorry, I'm laying down, like leaning back against stuff. But anyway, so with this mission, we get up to my gate, which is the last one. And it was the same gate. It had the golden crown on it, and all of a sudden he tells me, the priest, we stop, and on the last one, there's nobody else with us, just me. And so he says, the Lord says he wants to hear that you acknowledge your mission, because you have been delaying, and it grieves the Lord to have you delay his missions when you have been called for a specific purpose, and it's for a purpose that is going to impact more than just you and your family. It's going to impact the world. And he said, but the Lord is telling you, he wants you to end the disobedience, and he wants you to acknowledge your mission and to state what it is. And so I don't like to be rushed with anything, and I sat there and I said, so I know what my mission is, and I choose so-and-so as I get crowned, I guess, to help me fulfill the mission with your last day church. And then the priest, he looked happy with that, and he acknowledged it, and the gate opened for me. It's like the gates, they opened whenever you acknowledge what your mission was to them, like in front of them and in front of, nobody was opening them for you. So in other words, if there was an angel there that was opening it, I don't know, but the gate had a golden crown on it, and I was told, like, I was shown how I go back and forth through that gate, and I was told that I use St. Mary's gate. And so that was the same gate that I had brought my son through the first time when he was little for protection. But also with my dad, and regarding my dad, I had told you a dream about my mother and her death experiences that I had. And so with my dad, we had a hard time with him because he had had a stroke. I went in and I found him on the floor. He had had a full-blown stroke, and so I had to call 911, and my husband was coming home from work at the time, and it was an awful time for him. It just wasn't really good because the stroke had impacted him in such a way that, and he was a Vietnam vet, so it made it hard on him, and he had just severe problems of ever learning to walk again, and just trying to learn how to ride and do physical therapy. He had been in Vietnam. He was a prison guard after that for like 20 some years. His life was really rough and really hard. He had lived through the era of the Great Depression, I think, like the ending of it. And so he really was a very hard person to know in life, but when we saw the frailty that was coming with him, it just softened my heart all the more for my father. And so he had this period of transition, which was a really hard period because at the time my mother-in-law, her cancer had come back, had metastasized, and it had gone to her brain. She was falling and having strokes, so I was running her to the doctor every day and for radiation and for brain checks, talking about brain surgery with surgeons, and trying to keep my household going, of trying to be the cook, trying to clean my mother-in-law every day because she had to be bathed. I had to do her laundry every day, and see my dad at the stroke centers and getting transferred around, try to get the veterans insurance, which didn't get covered right up until he right before passed. And so this time it was grievous to me because I was back and forth, and I had a family of like at the time about 10 or 12 there, and I was like the caretaker, trying to caretake everybody. And my stepmother, of course my dad's wife, she had cerebral palsy and she's a diabetic, and so I was taking care of all of this. And then my dad had come to find out that they had mismanaged my father and they weren't rotating him the way they should have. So he wound up with bed sores, and it was just heartbreaking because several times I had to run, I had to flag down the nurses, like, how long has he been sitting in that? You guys have not been doing your jobs and stuff like that. And so, and then we had to take him to a plastic surgeon because they had to redo parts of my father's stomach for a bag, and they had to just redo the surgery, the plastic surgery area. And the first time he woke up through anesthesia just fine. The second time they asked me, well, does he normally take this long to wake up? Mind you, I had told him he was a diabetic, and if you're making him fast, you need to check his sugars. Well, then it turned out that a nurse was heard saying that, oh, well, they woke him up with Narcan because he had gone into a diabetic coma. So they used Narcan on him. Yeah. The mail care with my father was just extreme, and it was very sad, and it was horrifying for us. But in the process, the in-between process of grieving and mourning for my mother-in-law and for my father-in-law, or my father, sorry, my mother-in-law, I knew she was gonna pass. I didn't say nothing to my spouse because I'm sure he had a hint of it. Well, he wound up every day I'd take her in, I'd hear the song Well Done, that good and faithful one, whenever she was in the car, so I knew it was her time. The next time I was so drug out and tired that I could barely get into bed and barely praise the Lord, but I had that dream where I was following a group of people, and all of a sudden we stopped, and I was at the back of the group, and we were walking through like a red desert, and next thing I know I hear my name being called, and I look over and there's Jesus in like the River Jordan. It looked just like it, and he was beckoning to me. And so I went down, and he joked to me as I approached him, and he said, don't worry, a little extra water up the nose ain't gonna hurt you, it'll make you that much cleaner. And then he dunked me under, and I still remember the look in his eyes and the smile that he had in his face. And then he brought me back up, held his elbow out to me, and led me back to the group, and we continued on our way. That gave me the strength for the year. It was like a year that we had gone through this with both of them. And then I had a dream one day that all of a sudden we were in this room, this big giant living room that was loaded with like streamers and balloons, like reds and golds and blues, and there was cake on the table. There were all these people there. There's guests, there was party horns, and my father was in his wheelchair out of the stroke center, and he had these flags on the back of his little wheelchair, these little flags that he always liked on his bike whenever he was riding it. And so he wanted to go watch TV in my room, and so my stepmom and him went in to watch TV in the room while the rest of us were getting the party ready and everything. And the TV didn't work, and he complained about it not working, and I said, don't worry about it not working, and come and join us. And so he came out there in his little wheelchair, and there's just all these streamers and balloons going off, and it was very fun. It was a very good feeling, and so I knew that was his goodbye. It was a goodbye party they were having for him, but it was a happy one. It was a time of celebration because he was going to be leaving the body that could not move into one that could. And so, as much as that hurt, sure enough, he passed. My mother-in-law had died right as it turned Mother's Day at midnight, and then a month later my dad passed the day before my sister's birthday. So we had a funeral a month apart from each other. We even kind of joked around about the funeral parlor giving us discounts for family, which was kind of sad. We had to joke that way at the time, but anyway, after that, then I had a dream months later that I think it was a holding place in heaven, because all of a sudden my dad comes running in these tacky orange gym shorts with his head sweatband on. You know, I'm like, who knew heaven had a basketball team on earth? My father never really was into sports, but he had been in a basketball team in heaven. I'm like, heaven has a basketball team. Wow. So, you know, it was a dream that made me laugh, and I wish I could say things had gotten easier, but after the passing and everything was settled, we found out my stepmother a month later had breast cancer, and I had to take her in. She had a lump removed, a lumpectomy is what it was called, and so now I'm still currently running her occasionally back and forth to her oncology appointments and things. But that is a supernatural with my dad. And so one night they were telling him he needed to move his legs because he needed to try to exercise. Even if he was bedridden, he needed to try to move, but he couldn't. There was just like no feeling in his legs whatsoever, and they didn't understand this. So I started praying. I asked the Lord to have angels by his bedside and to move his legs for him if he couldn't move them. And my stepmom, that night, when I saw her the next morning, she told me that night, she said, after you left, after you prayed that, she said it was the craziest thing. She said, I get up and all of a sudden I see your dad's leg moving up in the air and his other leg moving like he was riding a bicycle. She said, I think the Lord heard your prayers. Well, you know, and this time I'm going back and forth still with my mother-in-law and then my dad while he's going through this routine. So I'm getting so worn out and so tired that I just didn't keep praying for those angels to be placed there. And, you know, either way, it was going to be his time, but they were helping to keep, I believe, the infection at bay, the sepsis that set in eventually. They were helping him to keep it at bay long enough for his niece to come, my cousin, because he had wanted to see her so badly when he was in the hospital, and she couldn't make it. And I remember remarking to somebody, I think it's being held off because the minute she gets here and she goes into that room and he recognizes her, I bet is a minute that he's going to pass. And so, sure enough, my cousin, my cousin, she's able to make it down from where she lives to where we are, and she had just got there. No sooner got in the door when we got a call from the hospital saying it's urgent. My dad's health just took a turn, and so we got my cousin down in there. My dad was still very in and out of his sleep and stuff, so he recognized her because as soon as he saw her, he had a slight smile and tears started coming down his face and running. But these are the supernatural experiences I've had with my father, including with my dreams as well, that have warned me, that have made me ready to be able to start the mourning process, because I am the one that tries to keep my family together during these times. I am the one that will not cry until everybody else is taken care of, because there's no time for me to. I don't have the time for myself. My family has to come first. We have to keep going. At whatever cost, we have to keep moving, because that is our job, because the Lord has a holding place waiting for us coming up. And so with all the suffering that we've done and all of the death we've walked through and things of family members and how hard it really was, I honestly believe that these supernatural experiences that we had, as well as the dreams, have all played into this. Now, I promised you Campfire story, I am so sorry. I have been so discouraged as of late and so busy and so tired lately. So please, if you get a chance to listen to this, I appreciate it. And I thank you again for joining me, those of you who even dare to watch these things. I appreciate your time. Thank you.